The 27th day of April, in the year of our redemption 1584, we departed the west of England with 2 barks well furnished with men and victuals, having received our last and perfect directions by your letters, confirming the former instructions, and commandments delivered by yourself at our leaving the river of Thames. And I think it a matter both unnecessary for the manifest discovery of the country, as also for tediousness' sake, to remember unto you the diurnal of our course, sailing thither and returning. Only I have presumed to present unto you this brief discourse, by which you may judge how profitable this land is likely to succeed, as well to yourself, by whose direction and charge, and by whose servants this our discovery hath been performed, as also to her Highness, and the Commonwealth, in which we hope your wisdom will be satisfied, considering that as much as by us hath been brought to light, as by those small means and number of men we had could any way have been expected or hoped for. The 2nd of July we found shoal water, where we smelt so sweet and so strong a smell as if we had been in the midst of some delicate garden, abounding with all kind of odoriferous flowers, by which we were assured that the land could not be far distant. And keeping good watch, and bearing but slack sail, the 4th of the same month we arrived upon the coast, which we supposed to be a continent and firm land. And we sailed along the same 120 English miles before we could find any entrance or river issuing into the sea. The first that appeared to us we entered, though not without some difficulties, and cast anchor about 3 arquebus shot within the haven's mouth on the left hand of the same. And after thanks given to God for our safe arrival thither, we manned our boats and went to view the land next adjoining, and to take possession of the same in the right of the Queen's most excellent Majesty, as rightful Queen and Princess of the same, and after delivered the same over to your use, according to Her Majesty's grant and letters patents under Her Highness' great seal, which, being performed according to the ceremonies used in such enterprises, we viewed the land about us, being, whereas we first landed, very sandy, and low towards the water's side, but so full of grapes as the very beating and surge of the sea overflowed them, and of which we found such plenty, as well there as in all places else, both on the sand and on the green soil on the hills, as in the plains, as well on every little shrub, as also climbing towards the tops of high cedars, that I think in all the world the like abundance is not to be found. And myself, having seen those parts of Europe that most abound, find such difference as were incredible to be written. We passed from the seaside towards the tops of those hills next adjoining, being but of mean height, and from thence we beheld the sea on both sides, to the north and to the south, finding no end of any both ways. This land lay stretching itself to the west, which after we found to be but an island of 20 miles long, and not above 6 miles broad. Under the bank or hill where we stood, we beheld the valleys replenished with goodly cedar trees, and having discharged our arquebus shot, such a flock of cranes, the most part white, arose under us with such a cry redoubled by many echoes, as if an army of men had shouted all together. The island had many goodly woods, full of deer, conies, hares and fowl, even in the midst of summer in incredible abundance. The woods are not such as you find in Bohemia, Muscovia or Hercynia, barren and fruitless, but the highest and reddest cedars of the world, far bettering the cedars of the Acores, of the Indies or Libanus, pines, cypress, sassafras, the lentisk, or the tree that beareth the mastic, the tree that beareth the rind of the black cinnamon, of which Master Winter brought from the Straits of Magellan, and many other of excellent smell and quality. We remained by the side of this island 2 whole days before we saw any people of the country. The 3rd day we espied one small boat rowing towards us, having in it 3 persons. This boat came to the island side 4 arquebus shot from our ships, and there 2 of the people remaining, the 3rd came along the shore side towards us, and we, being then all within board, he walked up and down upon the point of the land next unto us. Then the master and pilot of the Admiral, Simon Fernandino, and the captain Philip Amadas, myself and others rowed to the land, whose coming this fellow attended, never making any show of fear or doubt. And after he had spoken of many things not understood by us, we brought him, with his own good liking, aboard the ships, and gave him a shirt, a hat, and some other things, and made him taste of our wine and our meat, which he liked very well. And after having viewed both barks, he departed and went to his own boat again, which he had left in a little cove or creek adjoining. As soon as he was 2 bowshoot into the water, he fell to fishing, and in less than half an hour he had laden his boat as deep as it could swim, with which he came again to the point of the land. And there he divided his fish in 2 parts, pointing one part to the ship, and the other to the pinnace, which, after he had, as much as he might, requited the former benefits received, departed out of our sight. The next day there came unto us divers boats, and in one of them the king's brother, accompanied with 40 or 50 men, very handsome and goodly people, and in their behaviour as mannerly and civil as any of Europe. His name was Granganimeo, and the king is called Wingina, the country Winjandacoa, and now by Her Majesty Virginia. The manner of his coming was in this sort. He left his boats all together as the first man did, a little from the ships by the shore, and came along to the place over against the ships, followed with 40 men. When he came to the place, his servants spread a long mat upon the ground, on which he sat down, and at the other end of the mat 4 others of his company did the like. The rest of his men stood round about him, somewhat afar off. When we came to shore to him with our weapons, he never moved from his place, nor any of the other 4, nor never mistrusted any harm to be offered from us, but sitting still he beckoned us to come and sit by him, which we performed. And being set, he made all signs of joy and welcome, striking on his head and his breast and afterwards on ours, to show we were all one, smiling and making show the best he could of love and familiarity. After he had made a long speech unto us, we presented him with divers things, which he received very joyfully and thankfully. None of the other company durst speak one word all the time. Only the 4 which were at the other end spake one in the other's ear very softly. The king is greatly obeyed, and his brothers and children reverenced. The king himself in person was, at our being there, sore wounded in a fight which he had with the king of the next country, called Wingina, and was shot in 2 places through the body, and once clean through the thigh, but yet he recovered, by reason whereof, and for that, he lay at the chief town of the country, being 6 days' journey off. We saw him not at all. After we had presented this his brother with such things as we thought he liked, we likewise gave somewhat to the other that sat with him on the mat, but presently he arose and took all from them, and put it into his own basket, making signs and tokens that all things ought to be delivered unto him, and the rest were but his servants and followers. A day or 2 after this, we fell to trading with them, exchanging some things we had for chamois, buff, and deerskins. When we showed him all our packet of merchandise, of all things that he saw, a bright tin dish most pleased him, which he presently took up and clapped it before his breast, and after made a hole in the brim thereof, and hung it about his neck, making signs that it would defend him against his enemies' arrows. For those people maintain a deadly and terrible war with the people and king adjoining. We exchanged our tin dish for 20 skins, worth 20 crowns or 20 nobles, and a copper kettle for 50 skins, worth 50 crowns. They offered us good exchange for our hatchets and axes and for knives, and would have given anything for swords, but we would not depart with any. After 2 or 3 days, the king's brother came aboard the ships and drank wine, and ate of our meat and of our bread, and liked exceedingly thereof. And after a few days overpast, he brought his wife with him to the ships, his daughter, and 2 or 3 children. His wife was very well favoured, of mean stature and very bashful. She had on her back a long cloak of leather, with the fur side next her body, and before her a piece of the same. About her forehead she had a band of white coral, and so had her husband many times. In her ears she had bracelets of pearls hanging down to her middle, whereof we delivered your worship a little bracelet. And those were of the bigness of good peas. The rest of her women of the better sort had pendants of copper hanging in either ear, and some of the children of the king's brother and other noblemen have 5 or 6 in either ear. He himself had upon his head a broad plate of gold, or copper, for being unpolished we knew not what metal it should be. Neither would he by any means suffer us to take it off his head, but feeling it would bow very easily. His apparel was as his wives'. Only the women wear their hair long on both sides, and the men but on one. They are of colour yellowish, and their hair black for the most part. And yet we saw children that had very fine auburn and chestnut-coloured hair. After that these women had been there came down from all parts great store of people, bringing with them leather, coral, divers kinds of dyes very excellent, and exchanged with us. But when Granganimeo the king's brother was present, none durst trade but himself, except such as wear red pieces of copper on their heads like himself. For that is the difference between the noblemen and the governors of the countries. And you have understood since by these men which we brought home, that no people in the world carry more respect to their king, nobility, and governors than these do. The king's brother's wife, when she came to us, as she did many times, was followed with 40 or 50 women always. And when she came into the ship, she left them all on land, saving her 2 daughters, her nurse, and 1 or 2 more. The king's brother always kept this order. As many boats as he would come withal to the ships, so many fires would he make on the shore afar off, to the end we might understand with what strength and company he approached. Their boats are made of one tree, either of pine or of pitch trees, a wood not commonly known to our people, nor found growing in England. They have no edge tools to make them withal. If they have any, they are very few, and those it seems they had 20 years since, which, as those 2 men declared, was out of a wreck which happened upon their coast of some Christian ship, being beaten that way by some storm and outrageous weather, whereof none of the people were saved, but only the ship, or some parts of her being cast upon the sand, out of whose sides they drew the nails and the spikes, and with those they made their best instruments. The manner of making their boats is thus. They burn down some great tree, or take such as are wind-fallen, and putting gum and rosin upon one side thereof, they set fire into it. And when it hath burned hollow, they cut out the coal with their shells, and ever where they would burn it deeper or wider they lay on gums, which burn away the timber. And by this means they fashion very fine boats, and such as will transport 20 men. Their oars are like scoops, and many times they set with long poles, as the depth serveth. The king's brother had great liking of our armour, a sword, and divers other things which we had, and offered to lay a great box of pearl in gage for them. But we refused it for this time, because we would not make them know that we esteemed thereof, until we had understood in what places of the country the pearl grew, which now your worship doeth very well understand. The soil is the most plentiful, sweet, fruitful, and wholesome of all the world. There are above 14 several sweet-smelling timber trees, and the most part of their underwoods are bays and the such like. They have those oaks that we have, but far greater and better. After they had been divers times aboard our ships, myself, with 7 more, went 20 mile into the river that runneth toward the city of Skecoak, which river they call Ockham. And the evening following we came to an island which they call Roanoke, distant from the harbour by which we entered 7 leagues. And at the north end thereof was a village of 9 houses, built of cedar, and fortified round about with sharp trees to keep out their enemies. And the entrance into it made like a turnpike very artificially. When we came towards it, standing near unto the water's side, the wife of Granganimeo, the king's brother, came running out to meet us very cheerfully and friendly. Her husband was not then in the village. Some of her people she commanded to draw our boat on shore for the beating of the billow. Others she appointed to carry us on their backs to the dry ground, and others to bring our oars into the house for fear of stealing. When we were come into the utter room, having 5 rooms in her house, she caused us to sit down by a great fire, and after took off our clothes and washed them, and dried them again. Some of the women plucked off our stockings and washed them. Some washed our feet in warm water, and she herself took great pains to see all things ordered in the best manner she could, making great haste to dress some meat for us to eat. After we had thus dried ourselves, she brought us into the inner room, where she set on the board standing along the house some wheat like fermenti, sodden venison and roasted, fish, sodden, boiled and roasted, melons raw and sodden roots of divers kinds, and divers fruits. Their drink is commonly water, but while the grape lasteth they drink wine, and for want of casks to keep it, all the year after they drink water, but it is sodden with ginger in it, and black cinnamon, and sometimes sassafras, and divers other wholesome and medicinable herbs and trees. We were entertained with all love and kindness, and with as much bounty after their manner as they could possibly devise. We found the people most gentle, loving and faithful, void of all guile and treason, and such as live after the manner of the golden age. The people only care how to defend themselves from the cold in their short winter, and to feed themselves with such meat as the soil affordeth. Their meat is very well sodden, and they make broth very sweet and savoury. Their vessels are earthen pots very large, white and sweet. Their dishes are wooden platters of sweet timber. Within the place where they feed was their lodging, and within that their idol, which they worship, of whom they speak incredible things. While we were at meat, there came in at the gates 2 or 3 men with their bows and arrows from hunting, whom when we espied we began to look one towards another, and offered to reach our weapons. But as soon as she espied our mistrust, she was very much moved, and caused some of her men to run out and take away their bows and arrows and break them, and withal beat the poor fellows out of the gate again. When we departed in the evening, and would not tarry all night, she was very sorry, and gave us into our boats our supper half-dressed, pots and all, and brought us to our boat-side, in which we lay all night, removing the same a pretty distance from the shore. She, perceiving our jealousy, was much grieved, and sent divers men and 30 women to sit all night on the bankside by us, and sent us into our boats 5 mats to cover us from the rain, using very many words to entreat us to rest in their houses. But because we were few men, and if we had miscarried, the voyage had been in very great danger, we durst not adventure anything, though there was no cause of doubt. For a more kind and loving people there cannot be found in the world as far as we have hitherto had trial.